that's your music right there. You guys are running on the field. We're getting in the game. That's the music that's playing in your head. It's exciting. It makes your blood just jump and your heart pound. Good morning. We want to welcome you again. If it's your first time with us, we're so grateful that you chose to join us this morning and that you're here to worship. My name's Ben Bowles. I'm one of the pastors here at Homeport, and we just want to make sure that you know you're welcoming. We want to welcome everybody online. We have faithful followers who follow us online. We know a lot of people check us out online before they ever come and step foot in there. So we want to welcome you guys. I want you to know that you all are welcome this morning, and we are excited to kick off a new series we're calling Get in the Game. And before we get started this morning, or as we get started, I want to give you guys a little bit of a quiz. And so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm going to tell you their real name, and I want you to tell me their stage name or their nickname, right? Okay? So the first picture we got, this is Etta Kathleen Van Hamstren Hepburn Rustin. Audrey Hepburn, okay. Steveland Junkins. Real names. I'm not making any of this up, people. I'm not making this up, right? Who's that? Stevie Wonder. You guys, yeah. Can you imagine? Man, what an awesome name. All right, here we go. Cornelius Crane Chase. Chevy Chase, yeah. Lawrence Harvey Ziegler. That's Larry King, right? Ramon Antonio Gerard Estevez. That's Martin Sheen, right? Peter Jean Hernandez. Thank you. All right. So you could tell, like the first gathering, everybody looked and they're like, that guy's famous? Who is that guy? What? All right, yeah, Bruno Mars. All right. Eileen Regina Edwards. Shania Twain. And then Eric Marlon Bishop. Jamie Foxx. All right, Billy, you cheated. You were here in the first gathering and you're so loud. Oh, yeah. I hear you. Uh-huh. All right, yeah. Growing up, my people call me by my nickname. People call me Ben. That's not my full name. Only my wife and my mother still call me by my full name, Benjamin Allen Bowles. I know when I hear that long string come out, I'm in trouble. But yeah, people call me Ben. When I was growing up, I went through this little season when I was in elementary school where I was bullied, and the kids would call me these names that aren't church appropriate. And so I'm not going to share them with you this morning. Just know that they were there. But we all had nicknames, and I wonder what was your nickname growing up? Like, what did people call you? What was your nickname? And is your nickname still one of those names that people still call you today? Like that your name today is really your nickname, and that's not your full name. And so this morning, we do this thing called the question of the day. And so we just want you to turn the people closest to you and answer this really deep, dark secret in your life. What was your nickname, right? So share with the people close to you. Take just a moment. Turn to them. We're going to get started or get back going. Ignore me. It's fine. Really excited to share your nicknames because, I couldn't even finish saying turn the people closest to you, and, there's just roar in the room going on. You know, sometimes nicknames are enduring, they're thoughtful, they're even appreciated. Like you're grateful that you have that nickname, right? You didn't like your name growing up, and so people call you by your nickname and you loved it. Sometimes not so much, right? Sometimes we get nicknames and we're like, I really, really don't like that nickname. That's terrible. Stop calling me that out loud, right? It's interesting when you read through the Gospels, the biographies of Jesus' life in the beginning of the New Testament, you see that even Jesus gave out nicknames. Jesus gave out lots of nicknames. Sometimes they're endearing, and sometimes they're not so endearing, right? I mean, he calls the smug religious leaders of his days vipers. I mean, would you like to be called viper or rattlesnake? And not like your gang name where you're hard, right? This isn't gangland, your prison name. No, I mean, that was a slap, that was a real slap in the face. Whitewashed tombs or dirty cups, he called them these things, to get their attention. But sometimes he gave out really, really interesting nicknames. Even to his closest friends, he gave out these nicknames. And in Mark chapter 3, we see this list of the early disciples, and it includes their nicknames in it, right? So there's Simon, whose name is Peter. His parents really like Simon. Jesus, not so much. And he's Jesus, so he gets to call you something else. And so he says, I'm going to call you Peter, Petros, or rock. And he means like this is the foundation that we're going to build the early church on. He calls James and John the sons of thunder. And we're going to get to that in a moment because that's a really interesting nickname. Like, what did they do to deserve that? And then we have some boring people, right? Andrew, no nickname. Philip, no nickname. Bartholomew, not really. Matthew is also called Levi. So you have that in there. Thomas. Thomas is one of those ones. He's got multiple nicknames. Sometimes you'll see him called Didymus or twin because he was a twin. His brother must not have wanted to follow Jesus, a poor guy. That's on him, but Philip, or he does. We also call him Doubting Thomas, right? Because he didn't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. So if you've ever been called a Doubting Thomas, it's thank that guy. James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot who betrayed him, right? So you have these lists, and Jesus is giving out nicknames. And but the one I want to focus on this morning is James and John. Like, what in the world did they do for Jesus to want to call them the sons of thunder, right? Like, is this a good thing? They're like, really, hey, this is an amazing nickname? Or is this like, oh no, we're in trouble when Jesus pulls this one out? Like, no more sons of thunder, okay? Right? Luke chapter 9, he captures an account where we could see why they're called the sons of thunder. And this is what it says. It says, as the time drew near for him ascending to heaven, that is Jesus was resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And we really need to unpack that one day, this whole idea of Jesus being resolute for Jerusalem. But anyways, he's resolute for Jerusalem. He sends a messenger ahead to the Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival, but the village did not welcome Jesus because he's on his way to Jerusalem. And so here, this is an interesting thing, right? So often, if you ever have to drive through Jacksonville, you'll kind of understand this analogy, right? Like, who wants to drive through downtown Jacksonville? It's a mess. It's crazy. The exits aren't marked. The traffic is really heavy. I mean, it's just nuts. So what do? You take the Beltway around, right? You either go east or maybe you go west, depending on how much time you got. But you're going to go around the city of Jacksonville. The Jews, when they traveled, would go around Samaria. They would not take the I-95 strip from Jerusalem to Galilee, right? They would go around. So they would come out of Jerusalem. They'd go down to Jericho. They'd literally cross the Jordan River, walk up the other side of the Jordan River, bypass downtown or Samaria. Then they would cross back over the Jordan River and go into Galilee. And that was their highway, their kind of beltway. And so the Samaritans didn't like the Jews didn't like the Samaritans. And so, but Jesus is different. He's Jesus, and he just bypasses it. He goes through Samaria every time he's done it. And so he's going through Samaria again. He's coming from Galilee into Jerusalem, and they don't welcome him. And this is what happens. When James and John saw this, they said to Jesus, Lord, should we call down fire from heaven? What? Like, when did they ever think this was going to be a good idea? Because, like, you ever see Jesus like, hey, I'm going to call down fire from heaven, right? No, like, Jesus didn't call down fire from heaven. He was very compassionate, very loving. But here is James and John, and they say, let's call down fire from heaven. And they don't even tell Jesus, like, hey, Jesus, you should do this, right? Like, you're Jesus, the Son of God. Call down fire from heaven. They're like, hey, we got this. Do you want us to do it? Because we're willing, right here. I will call it down today, right? And then Jesus gives them that dad look. In verse 55, says, but Jesus turned and rebuked them. And you've been there, right? You're driving down the road. Something happens, and your dad just looks at you, right? You know you're in trouble. Jesus rebukes them in that way. And then it says they went on to a different village. And you can see that James and John's disposition is probably what garnered this nickname, Sons of Thunder. They are seemingly hotheads. And so Jesus gives them this nickname, and it sticks. And sometimes you like the nickname that sticks, and most of the time you don't. But this nickname sticks. But you can see that James and John being the three of the closest people to Jesus during his earthly ministry. The three closest people to Jesus are Peter, James, and John. So in their eyes, they're probably pretty important, right? They see that they get taken to places that the other disciples don't get taken. The other disciples get left at the door. Peter, James, and John get invited in. And we see that numerous times in the beginning of Mark, Jesus heals the little girl who's dead. He brings her back to life. Who comes with him? Her parents, Peter, James, and John, right? Like, that's the only people. The other 8 are left outside with the people that are laughing at Jesus because he said she's just sleeping. They know she's dead, and so they're stuck outside, and these 3 get to go with them. Same thing happens in Matthew chapter 17, what we call the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus is on the mountain. All of the sudden, as if from out of nowhere, there's a body, the body manifestation of both Moses and Elijah with Jesus, standing there talking to them. Who's there with them? Peter, James, and John. They're pretty important people. They think of themselves as pretty important. And it would be easy to see that they think they deserve this idea, this position of importance, and especially in Jesus' coming kingdom. But then there's an account in Mark chapter 10. I want you guys to go ahead and turn your Bibles. Mark chapter 10 is where we're going to be. You can either turn on your devices and scroll through your Bible app, or you can open a Bible. Bible's in the chairs on the tables. It'll also be on the screen here. But go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 35. And again, we're going to see this idea of why James and John called hotheads, sons of thunder. This is what it says. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over to speak to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. And how many people approached Jesus and were like, hey, Jesus, I need a favor, right? I mean, they're like, we need you to heal our people. We need you to feed us because there's no food out here. And here's James and John, and they're like, hey, Jesus, we need a favor. And you have to wonder what's going through Jesus' head. Could he tell on their face that they wanted something more? Could he tell on his face that this wasn't something that was going to be easy? Or was he just completely just not sure what was going on? He says, I want you to do this favor. And he says, what is your request? And then they replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, like they're buttering him up, right? When you sit on your glorious throne, Jesus is going to be amazing. We want to sit at places of honor next to you, one at your right hand and the other at your left. Boy, did they think they were important people. They think we belong next to you. When your kingdom comes, when you're sitting on your throne, we want to be the guys that are right there with you. You're second and you're third in command. They think they deserve this spot. Of course, they kick Peter to the curb, right? Because there's no room for Peter. He's out the door. But they are there sitting next to Jesus in their own minds. But this is what Jesus has said to them. You don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering that I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering that I'm going to be baptized with? And coming out of Easter, we've been talking about this. We see that Jesus was wrongfully accused. He's just slapped in the face. He's beaten. He's tortured. He's whipped. He's nailed to a cross. Eventually, he's got a spear shoved through his side. And he's saying, look, I know what's coming for me. Do you? You want to be my right and my left, but you don't know what I'm about to go through. And then, excited little children that they are, they're like, oh yes, I want to be tortured. Could you even, they don't even know what they're saying, right? They have no idea that this is what they're asking for. We are able. Then Jesus said, you will indeed drink from the bitter cup and be baptized with the baptism of suffering. And when you look at the lives of James and John, that's exactly what happens. Not very far into the book of Acts, James is run through with a sword, one of the first martyrs of the Christian faith, right? He's gone. Jesus only had 11, and then 12 with Matthias, and now one is gone. James is done. He's dead. He does not carry the church forward. His brother, John, will be one of the oldest living apostles. He will outlive them all. And then there's tradition that holds that John is arrested for spreading the Christian faith. He's persecuted. He's boiled alive in a fat of oil, right? And think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They throw the 3 guys into Nebuchadnezzar's fire, and they come out, and they don't even smell like smoke. Tradition holds that John lives through it. You can't tell he's fried chicken. And so they send him and they exile him to an island where he spends the rest of his life. by himself, and he eventually will write the book of Revelation. So they will indeed drink of this bitter cup. But then Jesus says this, I have no right to say who will sit in my right hand or my left hand. God has prepared those places for the ones that he has chosen. And we have no idea. Scripture doesn't allude to who those people would be. An early church father, Mother Teresa, maybe one of you all will sit there. We don't know. Jesus doesn't know. God knows, and he'll choose that. And then like the rest of us, right, when, you have that coworker who goes to the boss, asks to go home early, but there's still a lot of work left to be done, and you overhear the conversation. They're like, hey, I need to go home early, right? And they're trying to whisper. And you're like, oh, no, there's still so much to do. The disciples say the same thing. They get indignant. It says, then the 10 disciples heard what James and John had asked, and they were indignant. So Jesus calls them together. Let's rally back together. And this is what he says to them. This is what's really important for us. You know that the rulers of this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. This is what the world does. Everybody wants to rule the world. Remember that 80s song? That would have been such a great song to have playing in the work, Tears for Fears. Be a great Sunday morning. And, but, everybody wants to rule the world. Everybody wants to be the boss, the CEO, the owner, right? They want the great titles, the big names. And it was the same back then as it is today. And we still struggle with this, that the world wants to flaunt their authority over their people. But this is what Jesus says to the disciples, and he says it to us. But among you it will be different. The church is called to be different. It's not supposed to be the same. Our goal is not to be the rulers of this world. Our goal is not to lord it over or flaunt over the people under us. And then he says this, whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be a slave of everyone else. How many people are jumping up and down saying, yes, me, I want this cup, right? And then Jesus ends with this, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life for a ransom for many. If anybody deserved to be ruler over this earth, to lord it over the people, to flaunt it, it's the Son of God who steps out of the glory of heaven for you and for me. But what we see is not a man who flaunts his authority, but we see someone who serves right down with the least of these. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and give his life. What an example. As with most everything in the kingdom of God, things are very different from this world. It's a very upside down kingdom. The economy of God is very different from us. In God's kingdom, the first are last. It's the last who get to be first. The ones who will take a seat further back down. Even Jesus tells a parable. He tells a story about when you're invited to a big dinner banquet or over to a friend's house, don't go and look for the seat of honor right next to the host. Just sit further back a little bit, right? And then that way, if the host wants to honor you, he'll bring you right up. But you don't ever want to be that person and be like, hey, buddy, I'm sorry, but that seat's for somebody else, right? That would be totally embarrassing. So we're called to sit at the back. We're supposed to humble ourselves. Jesus tells there's another story recorded in Scripture where Jesus and the disciples are watching people put their offerings into the temple offering box. And this rich man comes, and he's got a big box of coins, and he just pours all of his coins in there. And it makes a big ruckus. And everybody knows what's going on. And then this widow comes. She's got 2 copper coins. She puts them in the offer box. They may not, in the noise of the crowd around them, it may not have even made a sound. Nobody knew what was going on. Jesus says, who gave the greater gift? See, it was the widow who gave the greater gift because she gives out of her sacrifice. She had nothing left but to trust in God to provide for her. The rich man, he gives out of his abundance, Jesus said. It's not a sacrifice. He's still going to have the best of things. He's still going to have the best food on his table. He's still going to have the best roof over his head. It didn't cost him a thing to give that gift. Things are different in the kingdom of heaven. And the same is true of leaders and of us all. Whoever wants to be great in the kingdom of God will be a servant. We have so many great volunteers in here who come in while no one's around. People who fix things, they clean toilets, replace light bulbs, they vacuum floors, they weed whack, they mow. You have no idea. They're little things that you'd only notice if they didn't get done, right? But they come in and they do it. These are great servants. They never look for accolades. They don't want anybody to know what they're doing. They get it. They don't brag about serving, but they love to serve. And they receive a reward that none of us will ever know about it. And they're happy. They're excited. But what about you? Is that a title that you would be happy with? Servant? Slave? Right? If you have a sign on your door, maybe you have a big sign out front or right on the window next to your door, and it says your name, and then it says your title. What would you do if it said slave? What if on your business card, what if on the placard on your desk it said Ben Bowles, slave? What if you work for that company that makes you wear a name tag, right? And instead of store manager, it says slave, servant. I mean, how many of us are running out there and accepting that or wanting that or desiring that? The Apostle Paul, he writes 2/3 of the New Testament, right? He plants all these great churches all over the known world. Yet when he introduces himself in a letter to the church, he introduces himself as a slave. I, Paul the Apostle, bond servant to the Lord Jesus Christ. Slave. Doulos is the Greek word for slave that Paul uses. James and John, they wanted to be second and third in command. They wanted to be generals or admirals or commandants. And here's Paul, who just wants to be a slave. He just wants to be a servant. What title are you aspiring for? Manager, owner, CEO, world-renowned chef? Do you want to see your name in lights in the sky somewhere? Maybe you just want to be famous for famous sake like the Kardashians, because none of us can figure out what they're famous for, but they're famous, and we don't ask questions about it. We just change the channel when they come on, but somebody keeps giving them a TV show, right? Do you want to be famous for famous sake? What title do you want? What title are you looking for? If you were to take out a piece of paper and you were to start writing out all of the titles that you desire in this life, where does servant land? Does it make it in 99th? Does it make it in the top 50? Top 20? Would it break the top 10? The top 5? How many of us are writing in the very first place, slave? That's the title I want. That's the title that I desire. Are you willing to be a servant? Is that what you aspire to? Are you willing to be a servant? I remember years ago talking with a ministry friend of mine, and he was talking about this recruiting event that they were doing for their church volunteers, and they had this big festival, and he gets up on the Sunday morning, and he says, as they're doing all this stuff, he says, if you've been a part of our church for 6 months to a year, and you have not found a place to serve, then it's probably time you find a new church home. Yeah, everybody's like, what? What? That's pretty brazen, right? So he gets back up next year. They do the same thing. He gets back up, and he's like, I think I may have been misunderstood. So I'm going to take a moment to clarify myself so you know where I was at last year. And he says, so let me just restate how I said it last year. If you've been a part of this church for 6 months to a year and you're not serving, it's time for you to find a new church home. Their core value is serving. They get it. They want to be just like Jesus. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life for a ransom for many. We want to be like Jesus. We want to be loving like Jesus. We want to be compassionate like Jesus. We want to heal people like Jesus and meet needs like Jesus met. But are we willing to serve like Jesus? And I know we're busy, and I know sometimes adding stuff to our life is hard, especially when we've got all these other priorities in our life. Where does the church land? But the reality is that when we're called to serve, like Jesus calls us to serve, we're not just saying no to the church. No, I can't serve. We're not just saying no to ministry team leaders who need help in their ministry teams. We're not just saying no to people who need the ministry that we have to offer them. The reality is we are saying no to Jesus. And I'm not trying to jerk your chain. I'm not trying to overhype this, but we just got to tell the truth. We have been called to serve. That is our lot in life. When we became a Christian, that is who we are. And if I'm honest, so many times when we're looking for volunteers, I feel like we're giving people the bait and switch, right? There are all these things that we need to do, and so we hype it up like, hey, this is going to be great. Come out and serve with us. You're going to make lots of new friends. Did I say it's going to be great? Right? I'm sure that the ladies who clean the toilets don't think it's great, right? People who come in and clean up all the communion cups and vacuum all the floor and all the trash, they don't think it's great. But it is amazing. It matters. There's more to serving than just having a great experience. And if we could get it into our head, if we can get our heads in the game, that this is who we are, this is what we've been called for, this is what we are made to do, it changes our perception. It changes our perception of our priorities. It changes our perception of how we use our time and our energy, because I see myself as a servant. So I'm going to do the things that servants do versus I'm here to just be here. You were made for serving. And some of you are looking at me and you're like, me made for serving? You don't know me, right? These nails just got done. I ain't serving nobody, right? Right? You were made for serving. God made us to do good things. Serving is a part of your purpose in life. It's etched into your very DNA. You are a servant. We are all servant. And when we're not serving, we're not complete. And we're not living up to what God has created us for. Ephesians chapter 2 says this, "For we are God's masterpiece, created anew in Jesus to do the good things that he has planned for us long ago. Before you were a twinkle in your parents' eyes, God had a plan for you." Think about that verbiage. Paul is telling the church in Ephesus, we are God's masterpiece. You are God's masterpiece, his greatest creation, a unique and special creation that God has created anew. When God created the marble that so many magnificent artists use, right? He created that marble first. And then the artist comes in and he chips away at it and he sands a little bit around and he creates this statue anew, right? The marble's already there. It's already been created. We were all created, and when we believed in Jesus, we were created anew. We took off all that old baggage, just like David in the statue that Michelangelo created. He took off all that baggage around David so we could finally see him in the marble. All of our baggage is gone. We're created anew. We're not our old selves anymore. We're created anew. We've stripped off all of these other things so we could do the good that God has planned for us to do. The good. God created you to do good things. You are part of God's strategic plan. Part of his strategic plan is to use you to do good. Good that's not going to be done without you. If you're not willing to do it, it's not going to happen. Why good? Because good changes things. When we do good, it changes things. We live in a world where good rarely happens. We're so caught up in our own lives and everything that's going on that we don't have time for anybody else. We're not helping anybody else. We're not serving anybody else. We're not doing any good for anybody else. You get so caught up. Doing good for God, it doesn't benefit you. The blessings you receive for it do, but the doing good doesn't. And because it doesn't, we don't do it. To serve, to be a servant is a selfless thing. Selflessness doesn't fit our current narrative. We only do what benefits me and whatever makes us happy. That's the story that we've been fed and told our whole lives, is that it's all about me. But more and more people are realizing, more and more people get it, that there's more for us when we serve. Jesus said it's better to give than it is to receive. There's more to this. And we're not happy. We're not happy people just consuming. Right? We've tried it the world's ways. We've got the t-shirt and we're still not impressed. It's time to get back to doing things the way God created us to do them in God's way. In all areas of our lives, we let him be the master, and we're going to be the servants. Matthew chapter 9, Jesus says to the disciples, the harvest is great, the workers are few. The workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into the field. Harvest is great. Harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. And so many of us approach Christianity like we approach everything else in this life. We go through life just consuming things. We consume so much. And we come into the church and we just consume Christianity. We're told our role as a consumer. We're told the world revolves around us as a consumer. When we're not happy, we have the right to complain about it. Right? But serving isn't a right. Serving is a privilege. And instead of being spiritual consumers who consume Christianity, what would happen if we were spiritual contributors? What if we started contributing and making the world around us a better place? What if we started contributing and doing the good that had been planned for us long ago? What if we got out of the stands and we got onto the field and played the game? This is just the beginning. We're talking about getting our head into the game because it's so important. There's so much that fills our head and takes over our minds. So if we could just get our head in the game, if we could just get focused on the game and understanding that we've been called servants, that we're to follow the great example of the greatest servant ever, Jesus, the Son of God, who on the night that he was betrayed, took off his tunic, wrapped a towel around his waist, and washed the disciples' dirty feet. He washed their feet. That's the example that's been left for us. We were made to serve others. We were made to do good. And some of you guys are already amazing volunteers, and we couldn't do it, what we do, without you. You serve in such important ways, but others of you don't. And I want to get you on the field. So this is what I need you to do this week. This is what I need you to do. I want you to take out your phone or write this on your paper and go to homeport.cc.org/volunteer. So you can take out your phone, and you can do it right now. You can write it down on a piece of paper, do it when you get home. Just make sure that you do it. Do immediately when you get home. Get on your computer before you even eat lunch and get on there. And this is what I just need you to do. I just need you to fill out the form. Your name, your contact information, and there's going to be a list of volunteer opportunities, and I just want you to check them. Check the ones that you're interested in, and we can get back to you. They'll come right to us, and we'll get back to you. And we want to help you get in the game. This is a great first step to get you onto the playing field with us. Don't wait any longer. Don't make me be like my friend and just put the smack down, right? Put the ultimatum on the line. We are a serving church, and we need you to be a part of it. Why don't you guys pray with me?